Gentlemen, please rise as the family enters the chapel. Steve, Carol, come on into the microphone here. Everybody else. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome those of you who are joining us online and everyone here at the funeral home. We're going to begin the funeral services of Mrs. Lillian Binder. Rabbi Deborah Newman-Kamen and Cantor Stuart Simon of Am Yisrael, the conservative congregation, will be officiating. At this time, I request everyone take a moment to be sure that your cell phones have been turned off, not to disturb the sacred funeral ceremony.
For those of you that knew Lillian, it wouldn't surprise you that she had some ideas about what she would like to see in today's memorial service, and so she especially asked that this song be played today.
And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do and saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off more than I could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all, and I stood tall, and did it my way. I've loved, I've I've laughed and cried. I've had my fill, my share of losing. And now, as tears subside, I find it all so amusing to think I did all that, and may I say, not in a shy way. Oh no, no, not me. I did it my way. For what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, then he has not to say the things he truly feels. They're not the words of one who kneels. The record shows I took the blows and did it my way. Our service begins with Psalm 23. Adonai roi lachzar, binote sheyarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yinahaleni, nafshi shovev, yanecheni v'maglei tzedek, leman shimo, gam kilech begetz al mavet, Lo irara ki ata imadi, shivtecha umishantecha, heima yenachamuni. Taruch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai, dishanta v'Hashem roshi kosi, Revaya Ach tov chesed yudafuni kol yamei chayai V'shavti bevet Adonai leorech yamim.
God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God has me lie down in the green pastures, leads me beside the still waters, and guides me on paths of righteousness. God revives my soul for the sake of glory. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod do comfort me. You set a table in sight of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of God forever. This afternoon, we have several family members that want to speak in loving tribute to their beloved mother, grandmother, and represent the multi-generations of Lillian's family. So first, I would like to call up her daughter, Carolyn.
I'm sure you think it's fitting. I'm carrying a Ralph Lauren bag. First of all, Cantor Simon, thank you so much. My mother really wanted that. That was how she lived her life. The other song she really wanted played was Elton John's I'm Still Standing. But we decided perhaps you'd give us an encore performance wearing one of her sparkly jackets after Shiva, if that's okay with you. My mom did not want this to be sad. She would have loved schmoozing with all of you. She would have had you in bright colors and sparkly outfits and lemon yellows. She would have loved to be finding out what's going on in your life. She would have been chic and elegant and smiling. One of her favorite expressions was, if you look good, you feel good. So I wanted you to see these pictures because if you look good, you feel good. She must have been feeling really, really good at 80, which is the Vogue portrait. That was her 80th birthday. And she must have been feeling really sensational at 90. This picture is when she was 90, as are the pictures over there. The last one was referred to as her centerfold. Pretty good at 90. At 95, she looked amazing. Her birthday was April 21st. She was 95 years old. And, she looked amazing. She promised that we should all look good and we should be honoring her as well. So in that vein, and she wanted me to, I'm going to channel my mother. And Rabbi, it will not surprise you that she provided for you as well, and I'm glad you're color coordinated. And the other thing that my mother did when for her 95th birthday, and she really must have been present. We were in Florida. All of the children and great-grandchildren were on a Zoom call. And courtesy of Lonnie and Reese and the girls, they brought the other favorite of my mother, which was a tiara. So I'm going to place it where it belongs. So we all will remember. When we toasted my mother on her birthday, and really on any occasion, her favorite expression was to happy times. And I've often thought about that because I'm so used to people saying l'chaim, which of course means to life. But for my mother, it wasn't just to life, it was to creating happy times. That's what she aspired to. She almost willed it to make everybody happy around her. Whether it was in Stage Deli in Detroit, or when she moved to Chicago, she held court at Once Upon a Bagel. And I have to tell you a very funny story about that. My mother ate tuna fish just about every day of her adult life. As a result, so do I, and most of my friends know that. And my mother was very upset during the pandemic that we didn't let her go to restaurants. We were being very, very careful. But we did know when I would go to her house, her apartment in Highland Park, I would see Once Upon a Bagel little tuna fish things. And I'd say, Mom, where'd you get these? And she said, oh, Steve had someone drop them off. Steve's at Once Upon a Bagel. And apparently, my mother called every morning and said, what's good on the soup? And every other day, they had little tuna fish delivered to her. So I had to call Steve this morning and say, when we got back into town, Steve, I know you're going to be very upset, but I have to tell you that, remember the woman you dropped off the tuna to, she passed away. And he said, oh my God, Carolyn, I love talking to your mother. He goes, I talk to your mother so often that I used to joke with my wife every morning that she was my girlfriend. And I said, my mother actually would have loved that story. So, my mom was of the opinion that if someone asked you to do something, you went because she wanted to be asked again. So she created happiness, whether it was on the soccer fields going, Lauren and Carly and everyone's games. She would indulge Drew with drones. She knew on the girls with the dance recitals. She was at the RZ, the games. She, as everyone also knows, was a big shopper. She loved shopping for people because it made her really happy. So what she delighted in doing with Brandon and Eli is she loved taking them to Zara because in her mind, they were the Zara guy build for these gorgeous, fashion outfits. And she would take them and then bring everything home, to which Steve would often say, well, how come you didn't get anything from Zara for me? So the boys had the heart to tell him he wasn't exactly the body build for that. But my mother, never to leave anybody unhappy, would then, look at what was stylish in the New York Times. She loved the Sunday Times to look and see what Ralph Lauren had or Chanel, and she read all the articles as well. But she would go and then bring a present for Steve from likely Neiman Marcus the next day that would be a tie or some cufflinks. And she tells the story, trying to make everybody happy, that when she was in New York one day, she was at the jewelry counter at Bergdorf Goodman, And a woman kept following her around, and she said, "What is it?" And she said, "I know you're Joan Rivers." And my mother said, "I'm not." And she said, I know you're Joan Rivers. Come on, come on. So my mother said she finally signed the autograph, Joan Rivers. And I said, "Mom, why did you do that if you weren't Joan Rivers?" She goes, "I don't know. I was trying to make her happy." So that is my mother, otherwise known, as you know, among the kids and grandchildren, as Glamorous Grandma, which is Gigi. One of my very close friends, when he met her in college, called her Diamond Lil because she was always sparkling. We have some of her actual original paintings that she did, and she signs them Lily Rosenberg. So she really was someone who lit up every room. One of my colleagues said, "Thank you for sharing your mother with us. She was literally incandescent." And I think that's a great word for my mom. So I've been thinking about sort of, how did she do it? I'm not talking about how she looks. I can give you those secrets later. But really, how did she lead this life of just spreading such pure joy and sunshine and live to the age of 95, just making everybody so happy? And she would never tell you this, but I will, because what makes her even more remarkable is that she figured out a way to be happy despite innumerable challenges in her life, starting when she was very young, and somehow came out happy. She was born in 1927. Her parents were Sam and Rose Gluck. They came over from Hungary. They married in Queens when I guess it wasn't as cool as it is now to live in Queens. They found their way to Detroit. And, my mother's actually fluent in Hungarian. She picked it up living with her parents. And she and her brother Emil lived in Detroit. Her father was a cabinet maker, kind of shy and reserved like my father was. And her mother, Rozi in Hungarian, was the doer. She was the seamstress, she was the balabush, she was the cook, she was the baker, she was the gardener. She took in boarders to make more money, so I'm convinced that's where the real estate interest comes, Brandon and Rachel and Randy in the family. But what you don't know is that because they were always trying to make ends meet, they had a fruit store. And my mother was required to work in the fruit store during lunch from school, after school, and on the weekends. Now, you would think she might harbor some resentment about that. She couldn't go out, etc. But if you ask her what was it like being in the fruit store, she would have told you, "Oh my God, I ate tomato and butter sandwiches every day with the ripe tomatoes, and they were delicious." And Eli is convinced, looking back, that maybe the key to her longevity was the fact that she ate all natural fruits and vegetables for much of the time as opposed to processed foods, although I think she made up for that a little bit later. But the point is, she never complained. She found a way to make that a positive experience. Similarly, when she was in Central High School, she used to tell us that there were, some divisions among the different cliques, and there were some girls who were wealthy, and they wore these cashmere sweaters. So, knowing my mother's interest in fashion, what did she do? Well, her mother was a seamstress. So her mother was able to make her outfits that I think probably, we don't have TikTok in those days, made everybody swoon. And there is a vest that my grandma made my mother. This has to be 85 years old with exquisite detail. And there's a tiny picture of my mother in it, which must have been 10 years old, doing some Hungarian dances. I have some of my grandma's work of art, but it really was a way, I think, for my mother to turn what would have been a difficult situation into something positive. I think the seminal experience, though, that was difficult was that her brother Emil contracted polio. This was before the vaccine, and it was very real. I mean, think about COVID. Polio was quite something, and she got a touch of it as well, and that's why she had a little bit of a curve back as she grew older, but you would never know that. She vowed that she would never complain about anything, and she never did. She knew that my uncle, Emil, her brother, was being taken to hot springs, iron lung, whatever could be done to make him better. And yet, I never heard her describe my Uncle Emil, or I never had an experience with my Uncle Emil that wasn't funny and laughing and mischievous. She used to say we used to fight like cats and dogs. My uncle would tell a joke and say, "Oh, he died laughing." He was an accountant in the morning, then he would go to the racetrack in the afternoon, And then in the night, he would go to an Italian restaurant in Detroit called Rocky's, which, as I watched The Sopranos, I think they were running a crap game in the back, I'm pretty sure. And I can see our boy saying, well, what sounds like pretty good life. And, but the point was, we all went along, we had fun going, and she really turned that experience into one that caused her to say, I will never complain. And as a result, I never heard my mother complain about an ache or pain, ever. Ever. The next seminal event in her life where I think she had to figure out, but was a good thing, she got married when she was 18. My dad had come back from service in World War II. There's a picture of their wedding. And in fact, we were remarking that my brother David looks exactly like my father did. It's really interesting how the family resemblances are so strong. But my father says he used to watch my mother pass by the neighborhood. He was really smitten with her. They met at a BBYO dance. And she was dating all the guys, because that would have been my mother. And her mother had the sense to say, Irving, he really loves you. This is a good one. He's a good man. She fell in love with him, and they went to California and had a 1-month honeymoon. This is in 1945. So she really felt very, very happy. She comes back. She has my brother David. She has my sister Sherry. What you don't know is that she suffered some miscarriages. And in that day and age, that was a very hard thing to do. And she describes that when she wanted to get pregnant with me, the doctor kind of pumped her full of drugs, which I'm sure Steve will say may explain a few things. But she thought I was pretty much the miracle baby. And instead of dwelling on the fear and the anxiety and all of those experiences, considering that in the late 1950s, what she told me when I was born was that she wore a gorgeous jacket to the hospital, because that's what you did. You got all dressed up. You got to stay there for a week, and they served you, champagne and steak, and how fun that was. So she weathers all of that. She has a great life with my dad. And then disaster strikes. After 32 years of marriage, my father dies suddenly, literally drops dead downstairs in our house of a heart attack at 57, and she's left a widow at age 50. Now, at the time I was a junior in college, and 50 seemed old. From where I stand right now, 50 is incredibly young. And we weren't in the best of financial circumstances. And I remember her saying to me, what was I expected to do? Curl up and die? I have to move forward. And she figured it out. She became a Weight Watcher lecturer, one of the first in the Detroit area, and helped people become sort of fashion conscious. If they lost weight, they had to figure out what to do with the clothes. She helped them do that. She started a business called Rent a Friend, which was for a certain amount of money. She would go visit people in the hospital and bring them cheer. If you know my mother, that's like the perfect profession. She had little cards printed, fashion coordinator extraordinaire, and it always reminded me of in Hello, Dolly, like the Dolly giving the card to Horace Vandergrader saying, call on Dolly. It was sort of like call on Lily. And along the way, she remarried a few times, and she did not want to be alone. She loved people. She loved their children. She loved their grandchildren, and everybody became part of one big family. In fact, we counted up in the obituary, I think, Eli, correct me if I'm wrong, there were 27 grandchildren and 30 great-grandchildren. So what a legacy. And then disaster strikes again. She's 90 years old, these great pictures, right after these great pictures are taken, and she's in front of Northbrook Court still driving, probably shouldn't have been, but she was, and she gets in a terrible car accident. And we thought she'd be a goner. She literally was in the hospital. She had no broken bones, and thanks to Risa and my mother's own determination, she gets into the rehab program at Evanston Hospital. They said that she was the oldest patient they ever took, and they took her because her attitude of determination was that she was going to make it. And she did. She walked out of there and was able to have 5 more years of unbelievable life with family. So if she willed and created happiness, I think that was part of it. I think the other part of why she was so happy, as I think about it, is she believed that everything was beshert. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. That's how she lived her life as well. She always said it'll be darkest before the dawn. She believed in God. She had that certainty. She had a mezuzah on her door where we were in Florida, and she must have kissed it every single time she passed, every single day. She went to shul more than anyone I know. Now, she didn't go and stay for 2 hours at services, I'm sorry to say, but for her, she wanted a sacred space, and anytime there was anything in the family, someone didn't feel well, someone was worried about getting into school, someone was worried about a test, someone that she knew had a heart attack, she would say, don't worry, I said a prayer. And what she would do is go to the nearest synagogue. It's kind of like a drive-by visit. She'd go in, have the car waiting. She went in, she said her prayer. She had a one-on-one with God, and then she basically said, okay, I'm done. And yes, she liked the kiddushes because she liked to kibitz. She loved the food. She just loved schmoozing and, the peoplehood part of things. She would tell jokes with friends, and she really enjoyed seeing everyone. And even the night before she died, last Friday night, I have to tell you that it was Steve's idea, which was beautiful. We lit Shabbat candles, as we do every Friday night, and we brought them into her room in her bed. And here she was, as sick as she was, and she went like this as we did the blessing, and she was present. So she knew. And my mom had gotten a terrible infection in Florida, which weakened her over time, and it was really a quick, rapid descent. And she'd always said to us, when I expire, she would never use the word die, and I'm like, Mom, you're not a milk carton, you don't lose, freshness. She said, no, when I expire, and she would joke with Aria, and she would say, I kind of figure like a red sports car is going to come down and take me up in an elevator to heaven. And we would say, okay, but maybe. But that was her deal. But from a Bashert perspective, how is it? She must have been right, because for the past 3-4 months in Florida and everything with COVID, we tried to bubble her. Each of the children and many of the grandchildren came to visit us, and she got one-on-one time with all of them. All of the Rosenbergs came for a pool party, and Randy came for his birthday, and Brandon and Annie came, and Lonnie and Reese and Rachel, Alexa, and Scott and Emily came, one by one by one. As I look back on it, it was totally Bashert that she should have the opportunity to see all of them and to really, really have a good time. And when this infection got to be too much, she had the unbelievable presence to say to me and Steve, come here, I want to talk to you privately. And she held both our hands on the couch and she said, we both know what's going on here. And I said, Mom, I don't know what's going on. And she said, yes, you do. She said, I'm dying. And she said, I just want to tell you, I have absolutely no regrets. I've had a great life. I want to thank you for making it so fabulous, and I'm ready to go. So let's do this. And I think Steve and I were just stunned by the clarity, the lucidity, the determination that for her, living where she might need a caregiver or where she couldn't be independent or where she didn't know, despite our saying, come on, let's try another antibiotic, let's try. She just was so ready. And I was so pleased that Steve was able to be by her side. And I really need to tell you that Steve was not a son-in-law, he was a son to my mother. And they never, ever had a crossword in 30 years of marriage. Let me repeat that. A son-in-law and a mother-in-law had never had a crossword in 30 years. And if that doesn't say something about the nature of her getting along with everybody, and I don't think, maybe Steve and I could say that, probably not, but it really is amazing. And so in addition to thanking Steve as being my rock and everybody, and thanking you, Rabbi, and Cantor Simon, and David Jacobson, our friends in Florida who helped us get ready in about 2 days, Peggy and Jeff and Jana coming in to just pack us up, and Eli. I have to say something about Eli. You may know that Steve and I are technically challenged, which is an understatement. And when this all happened and we knew we had to get Grandma home, get us home, pack up a house, get a dog home that was too big to fly, and get a car home, Eli just said, I'm coming. You guys are never going to be able to handle this. So he then stepped in and did absolutely everything as he always does. So how, and I do want to thank also the communities, both in Detroit and Chicago, who always welcomed and embraced our family and my mom at every JUF event, no matter where she went. People loved her and she loved them. I've been thinking about how I'm going to will happiness in the future by her example. And in addition to celebrating family and smiling, which is really important, I want you to know that, this is hard, she is really going to help me and Steve find some peace. Many of you know this, some of you don't, but in the obituary we mentioned the late Shalom Nassiter. Shalom Nassiter was a brother, Shalom of our children. Shalom Nassiter lived a day, less than a day actually, was born 26 years ago on Father's Day, 1994, and he died. He was our baby. And my mother was there because we thought it was time to have a baby. And as you could imagine, Steve and I were devastated. And my mother was the one who said, don't worry, share it. You will find happiness, good things will happen. And you know, when you're devastated, you can't think. You just can't think. And not only was she right, despite that tragedy, because Brandon and Eli came along, who are blessings and then some, but when we lost the baby Shalom, and we were in a bit of a state of shock, it was a surprise. The baby was buried at West Lawn, where you bury babies. And it always bothered me and Steve that the baby was here and everybody else was going to be here. And so when we bought some graves and we knew that my mother was going to be buried here, she had decided with us that when she expired, so to speak, that the baby would be next to her. And as hard as this is, it brings me and Steve some closure and some peace to know that after Shiva, we're going to bring Shalom and my mom together. And I'm going to hold on to that. My sister sent me a very poignant note, and the last line of which was, she said, you know, death ends a life, but not a relationship. Death ends a life, but not a relationship. So, Mom, we're going to talk, and we're going to shop really, really soon. And I love you. Thank you.
I told Carolyn that if I had a feather boa, I was going to wear it in honor of her mom. I don't know if I get to keep this, but I do want to say that after Lillian's car accident, after she recovered, you had a big family party to celebrate lots of different events, but I was told at that point we weren't allowed to say what age Lillian was when we were celebrating. So I'd now like to call up Dr. Barry Rosenberg.
Thank you, Rabbi. Grandma Lillian, Gigi, as we affectionately knew you, thank you for being an outstanding grandmother to me and my wife Sharon, to my brother Steve and his wife Heather, to my brother Kevin and his wife Michelle, to my sister Shelley and her husband Daniel, and to my cousins Brandon, Eli, Lonnie, Risa, Scott, Emily, and Randy. Thank you for being a devoted and caring great grandmother to Drew, Lauren, Carly, Brooke, Hannah, Julia, Nathan, Joey, Naomi, Leo, Levi, Rachel, Alexa, Abner, and Leo. We will always remember Grandma Lillian's optimistic outlook and her radiant smile. Her confidence and composure in conversation and in wardrobe inspired us. As you heard from Carolyn, Grandma would say, if you look good, you feel good. And her commanding presence stayed true to this rule. On the sidelines of my daughter's soccer games, people just could not believe that she was in her 90s. Grandma loved a party, a celebration, a simcha. She treasured attending her great-grandchildren's birthdays, school events, and Jewish milestones. She was known at Bernard Zell as the Princess Grandma for her tiara headbands. She was arguably Lord & Taylor's most long-standing and loyal customer, with a special preference for furry, sparkly, bold-colored items. If you notice that far picture on the right, it was from her personal quest to find cowboy boots in Arizona for herself. But in fact, that resulted in a UPS special delivery of a cowboy hat for my son Drew when he was in early elementary school, and these cute, tiny little pink boots for my toddlers at the time, Lauren and Carly, these pink cowboy boots. Living in Chicago, we had a really special tradition of meeting Gigi up at Once Upon a Bagel, as you heard, on Sundays in Highland Park, followed by shopping trips for her great-grandchildren. And I think notably last year, Gigi ventured out to it's like a tween favorite store called the Bead store in Highland Park. And what was notable here was that she was busted by Auntie Carolyn for doing this shopping during the height of COVID. We really cherish spending holidays with Gigi. I think we have really fond memories of dinners for Hanukkah, for Shabbat at Carolyn and Steve's home, Sunday night dinners up at Northmore for the buffet. These are memories that we will have forever. And I wanted to make a special mention of how much I appreciated Grandma Lillian warmly welcoming my wife, Sharon, into our family. And something that I will always remember is that Lillian treated Sharon equivalent to her own biologic grandchildren. And over time, Lillian and Sharon really developed a special grandmother-granddaughter relationship and bond. Lillian was blessed to be lucid and active and vibrant until the end. And as you heard, recently in December, our whole Rosenberg contingent was with her in Florida for a pool party. And a funny memory from that was that she famously asked Uncle Steve to grill her just one more hot dog with no bun. So in closing, Gigi, may your memory be a blessing. Thank you for your energy, your positivity, your inspiration, and all of your support. We love you.
Now call on Brandon.
Okay. I'm looking around right now at everyone who came and how many lives my grandma Lillian touched. It's truly incredible, or terrific, as she would say. But seeing all these dark colors and sad faces just doesn't feel in line with who she was. My grandma was larger than life. She wore multicolored sequined outfits, bright red lipstick, bleached blonde hair, and a big smile that captured the attention of everyone in the room, no matter where you went. She had a wardrobe that rivaled any major Hollywood actress, and I guess she wanted me to dress like that. Because after college, she brought me this bright blue blazer that I swore I would never wear in a million years. But for some reason, I always stored it in my closet. Well, today it only seems appropriate. It's great. Zara. She never wanted sadness for today. All she wanted to do is celebrate, and I wanted to honor her by celebrating her life and all the great things she brought into this world. My grandma and I were very close. We had lunch or dinner every few months. If it was lunch, I didn't even have to ask where we were going. There was only one option. It was Once Upon a Bagel. Did you know they make home deliveries? Well, they don't. Not unless you're Lillian Binder. For my grandma, they brought a little container of tuna, a toasted, what she would call it, a Saggio bagel, or bialy, with a side of Thousand Island. They'd walk right down the block to her apartment. If we were dining in, we always had the big table right in the center of the place. It was perfect because, well, let's face it, my grandma Lillian was a flirt. Half the time she'd be looking at me, and the other half of the time she'd be making eyes at older gentlemen who would inevitably make their way to our table. And let's be honest, no one could resist her charm. She was the life of the Shabbat dinner table conversation. There were a few things that she said that if I repeated, we may not be allowed back here. But there is one moment that really sticks out. So picture this. My mom, my dad, and Eli are sitting at the table in our house in Highland Park, enjoying a lovely Shabbat evening. And for important context, and this is very important, she was unmarried at this point in time. Towards the end of dinner, she kind of leans in her quiet voice and goes, you know, Steve. And he goes, yes, Lillian, in his kind of stern Stephen Nassiter tone. She goes, if you can help me find a nice Jewish man, there might be a big contribution to the JUF coming. My mom said never a harsh word, but that might have been an exception. I'm sure you can imagine how he reacted. She impacted everyone in her life so deeply. I meant the world to my family and me, which if you haven't noticed, is quite large. So large, in fact, that if every Nassiter Rosenberg offspring wished to speak today, we'd be here for a few days. So, instead, I asked my brothers to describe Lillian in just a few words. And here's what I got. She was colorful, authentic, supportive, a role model for her great-grandchildren, confident, strong, and unapologetically herself. I love my grandma Lillian with all my heart and will miss her dearly. She was the most supportive and loving role model I could ever ask for. There wasn't a golf tournament or event she ever missed. If you were down, she was there to pick you up with a glass half full attitude. One of my brothers shared with me her favorite quote that stuck with him: if you miss the bus this time, another bus is coming. Trying to summarize everything she taught me and what she brought into this world in a few minutes today is impossible. As a grandson, spending time with her was not a chore, but it was something that I looked forward to the whole week. And if I ever become a grandpa one day, I only hope my grandchildren will feel the same about me. Of all the personal traits she left behind, there are two main things that will stick with me. I will always keep her sense of optimism with me wherever I go. And number two, I will always keep celebrating.
I now call on Shelley Rosenberg.
It's hard to follow after what you've heard so far about my grandma Lillian. We started to affectionately call her G-Lil, or Gigi, as she started to have more and more great-grandchildren. A global pandemic could not stop Gigi from spreading her love and her positive attitude. Even my baby, 15-month-old Levi, had the chance to be held multiple times by Gigi. I would like to share some perspective from growing up as Gigi's granddaughter. Gigi tragically became a widow at 50. But as you heard from my Auntie Carolyn, she persevered. Grandma Lillian showed me what it meant to be a strong and independent woman. Gigi was determined to do what made her happy, as you've heard. It did not matter who she was with, where she was living, or what she was wearing. Gigi exuded happiness. Growing up, I often went to Stage Deli in West Bloomfield with Gigi. We'd draw high heels on the placemats while we waited for our bagels and lox. I later learned that Gigi could draw more than just high heels. She was a talented artist. One of her watercolors still hangs in my childhood bedroom. Then she decided it was time for me to have my own high heels. Every year, she took me to Somerset Mall to pick out a few outfits for the new school year. This was no ordinary grandmother-granddaughter shopping trip. She picked me up in her two-door red sedan, which meant I got to sit next to her in the front seat. She would drive with the windows down, taking in the breeze. Now, sometimes she would put the pedal to the metal. It was a good thing she had a fuzzbuster radar detector. We would be cruising down Woodward, and all of a sudden, we'd hear loud beeping, warning her of likely police presence. Gigi would casually slow down, playing it cool. At the mall, Gigi encouraged me to pick out unique outfits. I also saw firsthand how much Gigi loved a good deal. She would spoil me at Nordstrom, but then take me into Forever 21 to pick out some sophisticated styles on a budget. She was the only grandma with a fuzzbuster and who frequented Forever 21. Gigi's wardrobe was legendary, as you've heard and as I think you all know. To Gigi, what you wore was an opportunity to show off your personality and to make a statement. I bet many of you can recall an exotic outfit that Gigi modeled with grace. My own mother-in-law just loved Gigi's gold leather pants. She told Gigi she wanted those pants for herself. My favorite Gigi outfit was what she wore to my wedding. It was a formal black tie affair. The groomsmen were wearing black tuxes and the bridesmaids were wearing pale blue dresses. Gigi came down the aisle strutting a neon yellow double-breasted jacket with a white feather boa. Her outfit could only be matched by her attitude. Right after the ketubah signing, while many were crying happy tears, one of my husband's friends asked, "Does anybody want to take a shot before going down the aisle?" Gigi piped up, "I do." Gigi gave a hearty l'chaim, surrounded by 10 20-something young men. I can't tell you how many friends on my wedding night remarked that they hoped to be just like Gigi when they grew up. This was 2015. Gigi was 88. Gigi was always the life of the party. Holding a glass of white wine, with ice cubes of course, on the dance floor. Gigi's 90th, as you heard, at the time was dubbed her Feeling 21 birthday. To Gigi, age was just a number. But Gigi wasn't just the belle of the ball. She was a rock day in and day out. No matter what time of day I called her, no matter what she was doing, as you've heard, she would exclaim, "I am terrific," and then pepper me with questions. Gigi had a positive attitude no matter the occasion. She was even positive and enthusiastic when we spoke last Saturday. My toddler singing her happy birthday just lit Gigi up. It feels surreal to be standing up here today. I always thought Gigi was invincible. But even in the end, I understand, and as you've heard, she died on her own terms. That was my grandma Lillian. She wrote her own rules in life, and even in death. Nothing could ever stop her pursuit of living life to the fullest in the pursuit of happiness.
And now, Eli.
It's November 3rd, 2015, and at my basketball tournament in Memphis, Tennessee, sits Lillian in the front row, under the basket, in an Elton John-like epilepsy-inducing jacket. Definitely contributed to some missed free throws. It's the end of the second quarter, and it's a very close game. With a few seconds before halftime, a member of the opposing team, as time expires, launches a half-court shot. I watch it fly, right on target, ramming squarely into my grandmother's face. At about 90 years old and 90 pounds, a Wilson evolution straight to the face would likely subdue even the most cheerful among us, but not Lillian. A testament to her character, she laughed it off, and when I ran out of the tunnel for the next half, she waved with one hand and held an ice pack on her face with the other. That was the thing about her. She was unconditional. Humans are by nature conditional beings. Their mood, their support, their everything hinges on what's going on around them. We all allow our surroundings to impact our mood. Not her. Not her. Her happy gait was unshakable, her confidence was unimpeachable, and her love was limitless for her 27 grandchildren and 30 great-grandchildren. Upon her passing, the outpouring of support I've received from people who only knew her as the unofficial, tiara-wearing mascot of whatever team I was playing for just served as ever more a testament to this quality in her to just radiate positivity. There's a unique purity in her eccentricity that is so fundamentally endearing, and we all admire the authenticity. Now, I've consistently been asked how on earth she was able to live not just so long, but with such vigor. She always remarked, there are senior seniors and there are junior seniors. In 2014, she took me to the Real Madrid soccer game at the Big House in Ann Arbor that today still holds the record for the most attended soccer event in North America. There were 110,000 fans. She walked miles in gargantuan crowds in sweltering heat without any assistance at age 88. Was it some fad diet? Was it her Lord and Taylor Black card? What was it? As I stand here today, I finally have figured it out. Her heart was so pure and free from blackness that it was able to pump at full speed for so long. 95 years. She lived through the 1920s and the 2020s. She remains the best judge of character I've ever encountered, and this quality comes from wisdom gleaned over so many years of fruitful life, but also a lack of an ego that allowed for zero self-projection into people. She took people and life for what they were. Now, Grandma and I share a special bond, fused with inherent love, but also simply because we enjoyed each other's company. This bond was accelerated over the pandemic, wherein we lived under the same roof for about a year, and I was acquainted with some of her more unsavory habits. This lady consumed more Sweet and Low than I thought was humanly possible. The result of which is that I'd often walk into her room and find her coffee table littered with half-open packets of white powder, causing the table to look like a prop from Scarface and make me rethink where she got her famed energy from. I'd purchase Sweet and Low off Amazon that would come in literal wooden crates, and these pink packets were a reminder that she always had to sprinkle sweetness everywhere in her life. She would add Sweet and Low to her white wine, much to the surprise of onlookers at most restaurants, which led me to test out a hypothesis I feel I must come clean for. Over the pandemic, I assumed the responsibility of Instacarting groceries for my woefully technologically inept family. Perhaps I was watching too much Shark Tank, or I just needed a new hobby since all sports were canceled, but I was convinced that we could optimize our expenditures if instead of buying Lillian name brand white wine with dignity, that I could purchase $3 Aldi wine, and she would be none the wiser, especially with her pinch of sucralose and diluting it in her famous ice. Our first few switcheroos went off without a hitch, or so I thought. Eventually, in true Lillian fashion, she pulled my mother to the side, softly whispered in the gentlest tone, "I appreciate all you do for me, but this new white wine you've been getting me is completely undrinkable and makes me gag. I just throw it out when it arrives. Could I please have some Kendall Jackson?" Now, this encapsulates her in two ways. One, never complains. But two, she can never fathom to think I could do something wrong. Grandma, I know you are up in heaven and got there with a VIP escort because your spot has been reserved for some time. And up there in heaven, I'm sure you told the angels what designer shoes would best match their wings. We all lost an incredible woman, and I lost something much more, as hard as that is to believe. I lost my biggest fan. No matter the seminal occasion in my life, Grandma was there. When I accepted my offer to go to college, Grandma was there and pressed the button in her patented way with her knuckle instead of her finger. At every game, Grandma was there. Every birthday, Grandma was there. Every dinner, Grandma was there. And now, Grandma is there. Now, regardless of the occasion, she would raise her glass with her bony fingers and a big grin, and she proclaimed to happy times, as we've heard. A fitting mantra. So, Grandma, with some sneakiness I know you'd appreciate, I smuggled in something. I want to do one final toast, complete with wine that isn't rancid and sweet and low from your personal stash. Every day. To happy times, I love you. Thank you.
So I just want to say the last time I saw Lillian was at Alexa's bat mitzvah, where she questioned me about my skincare regime and told me that she heartily approved. So that was coming from her. That was really a great compliment. And the previous time I saw her before that, she asked me if I knew anybody that I could fix her up with. We were actually at a JUF brunch at Am Yisrael, and she's like, can you please stay for a few minutes when it's over? I have something really important I need to speak to you about. But I'm just going to say one quick story that I don't think I ever told you, which is several years ago, my oldest and dearest friend was volunteering her time at the Highland Park Hospital, and she called me and she said, I met the coolest woman today who was doing some volunteer work at the hospital. She says that she knows you, and she says, tell her Grandma Lillian says hi. So, you know, I'm sure all of your friends and family had that same experience, but I want you to know that even I had the experience of a friend of mine meeting Lillian and how remarkable she was and what a presence she had wherever she went. So in her honor and in her memory, we traditionally read Eshet Chayil at a funeral service, and I would like to read it to you now. Eshet Chayil mi yimsa v'rechok mifim nichra b'tach b'alev shalal v'lo yaksar. A woman of valor who can find, for her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and nothing shall he lack. She renders him good and not evil all the days of her life. She opens her hands to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is robed in strength and dignity and cheerfully faces whatever may come. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She tends to the affairs of her household and eats not the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her. Her husband, too, and praises her. Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Place before her the fruit of her hands. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. Please rise for the Almalei Rachamim.
El Malei Rachamim Shalchein B'Meromim Hametzei Menucha Nechuna Tachat Kanfei Hashchina Be'amalat Kidashim Atarim Kizora Kiamasirim Et Nishmat Brindle Bat Shmuel V'Rachel Shelcha Le'olama Began Eden Tei Menuchata Ana B'Rachamim Hastira B'Sedek Nafecha Le'olamim Utzror B'Tzror Achayim Et Nishmata Adonai Unachlata V'Tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava v'nomer amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment will continue at West Lawn Cemetery located at 7801 West Montrose in Norridge. The family will then be going to Northmore Country Club, the South Patio Tent. That information is on the service folder. They'll be together today from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. There'll be a minion at 7 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, the rest of the Shiva will be private. The family requests that you respect that, but please keep in mind they are accepting no visitors at the residence. Memorial contributions to the Jewish Federation, the Lillian Binder Memorial Fund, that information is on the service folder. For those of you who are joining us online, that information you can find on the funeral home's website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing many of the cars with a flag that will be affixed to the top portion of your car. Please have your high beam headlights and your flashers on. Please try to not be on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery, and use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. At this time, I'd like to call upon all of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren to serve as pallbearers, as well as Jana Krupoff. Please rise as we escort the casket of Mrs. Lillian Binder, along with her family and the clergy from the chapel. Just a last reminder, please go to your cars as soon as the family and Lillian escort or leave the chapel. The family is not going to their cars until the lobby is cleared, again, to keep everyone safe. Thank you.